We do have a quorum here, so that's good. So let's go ahead and move on to the approval of the January 14th, 2021 minutes. If I could get a motion to approve.
Karen, I would move for approval of the minutes. It's John Conley from Vista.
Okay, thank you. And do I have a second?
I will second that motion. Tony Shoup, City of El Cajon.
Okay. Seth, I know we do this a little bit differently every time, but can I have you just go ahead and do the roll call and have us provide our vote that way?
I can do that.
All right.
Chair Brindley, City of San Marcos.
Yay.
Tony Shoup, City of El Cajon.
Yay.
Tiffany Allen, City of Chula Vista.
Yay.
Chris Jacobs, City of Santee.
Yay.
Dave DeVries, City of Poway.
Yay.
Noah Alvey, City of Lemon Grove. Was that a yay, Noah? Just want to make sure.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks. Jesse Brown, City of Coronado.
Yay.
Megan Openshaw, City of Imperial Beach.
Yay.
John Conley, City of Vista.
Yay.
Alyssa Muto, City of San Diego.
Yay.
Don New, City of Carlsbad.
Yes.
Thanks, Don. Jeff Hunt, City of Oceanside.
Yes.
Joseph Smith, City of Del Mar.
Yay.
And Mike Strong, City of Escondido.
I will abstain due to absence.
Okay. That motion passes unanimously with one abstention.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, moving right along, we have agenda item 3, the public comments and communications or any member comments. Before I open it to the member comments, Seth, do we have any public comments?
If anyone who's not promoted as a panelist has a public comment to make, they can raise their hand and we'll call on them and unmute your microphones. This is the opportunity to make non-agenda public comment.
Okay, bear with me as I'm scrolling through my list. I don't see any raised hands.
I don't either.
Okay, so with that, open it to the twig as far as any member comments. This is typically the opportunity where we can talk about anything that's exciting going on in our jurisdictions that we would want to share with the twig group. So I open it up to the twig members to raise their hands and promote ongoing activities. Give it a couple seconds here. All right, Mike Strong, you're up, City of Escondido.
Thanks. I just wanted to advertise that the City of Escondido City Council adopted our updated climate action plan. So we're joining the crowd of those that have recently gone through updates and looking for more ambitious targets. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we had a little bit of a success story last night. So thank you.
Wonderful. That's awesome, Mike. Congratulations. A lot of hard work goes into those caps. So I'm sure the community of Escondido will be better for it. Let's see here. All right, I'm not seeing any other raised hands at this point. So let's go ahead and move on to the meat of the meeting here. We've got agenda item 4. Allison Wood and Rachel Cordes from Sandag staff is going to talk to us a little bit about the status of the 2021 regional plan for the Series 14 growth forecast. You're up.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Hi, good afternoon. My name is Rachel Cortez and I have met a few of you, but for those who I haven't met, I'm a researcher and modeler in the Economic Demographic Analysis and Modeling Group, and we're in the Data and Modeling Division. So my group is responsible for the growth forecast and the yearly population and housing estimates that we use for modeling and research purposes. So I'm going to give a brief recap of the efforts that we've done this far to work on the 2021 plan, the forecast that goes into that plan, and Allison's going to help update on the methodology and assumptions that went into the SCS land use pattern. So you can advance the slide, please. Thank you. So the last time that the land use modeling group came before the TWIG, we were here to talk about the use of the Department of Finance population projections. So we use the population projections from the Department of Finance as a control at the region level for population by demographic characteristic. And in 2020, they revised that series of projections. And we went to the board of directors and internally had conversations about changing that projection series to use the updated data. And we did so. We came to the TWIG to talk about that because one of the features of that projection series is a lower total population in 2050 compared to earlier versions. So that was, I think, early last year, right before I think we all stayed home for a year. So that was the last time we were before you. But since then, we've done a lot of other work, and using those population data along with historical rates and assumptions and ways that we assume that those rates should change in the future, we develop a forecast of housing and jobs for the region. And we held several internal peer review panels, PRPs, on the assumptions about the data rates and other inputs that were used to develop projected rates. I see Seth's question. What are the key data and levels of geography that we rely on?
Sorry, Rachel. That was a question that we have for the TWIG members. I was just putting it in the chat.
Oh, okay.
So that it could be up there so when we're ready to ask that question, everybody.
Sorry. I was excited that I got a question, so I was looking forward to it. So, okay, thank you. But so we had several PRPs and developed those assumptions and data inputs. And the next slide, please. The resulting forecast, you can see the line chart here, very simple, very kind of low flat growth really throughout the region from 2016 to 2050, but about 437 more people, about 440,000 more jobs, and about 274,000 more housing units in the region between 2016, which is the base year of the forecast, and 2050. Next slide, please. So after the region-wide totals are derived, the growth is then allocated to the sub-regional areas in the region. And the most important part of this process is the collection of housing unit capacity that we undertake with all of you guys. And we ask you to interpret your general plans and derive a possible scenario for additional housing units in your jurisdictions out to 2050. And you all, some of you might remember fondly, I hope, that we undertook this process first in 2016. And at that point, we were collecting capacity for the 2019 Regional Transportation Plan. When it was decided that the 2019 plan would be a federal update, we did use that capacity that you provided back in 2016 for those data products. But then once we had more time to develop the forecast for a 2021 plan, we came back to the TWIG and we asked again if there were any substantial changes in that interpretation of general plans that you wanted included in the next iteration of the forecast. And that was finalized in 2018. And that is the capacity that we ended up using in the forecast for the 2021 regional plan. So after developing the housing unit capacity and modeling assumptions for this sub-regional allocation, last summer we started to develop data and methodologies for the Sustainable Community Strategy land use pattern, which Allison will talk about next.
Okay, hi everyone. I hear a little bit of an echo. Hi again, I'm Allison Wood. So I wanted to start with just a quick overview of some of the requirements that we need to look at when we're developing our land use scenario for the Sustainable Community Strategy. So these come from Senate Bill 375, that as we develop our regional transportation plan, the Sustainable Community Strategy needs to include a land use scenario that helps us meet our mandated greenhouse gas reduction target, which is 19% reduction by 2035. It also requires us to accommodate the RHNA allocation. So the most recent 8-year cycle of RHNA needs to be accommodated in the SCS land use scenario. And then we also need to use the latest planning assumptions. So all of that work that you all worked on with Rachel over the last few years makes sure that we're reflecting all the latest assumptions that you all are working on in your plans. And go to the next slide. So for this SCS land use scenario, we want to put forth a scenario that really can help us meet our GHG targets. And to do that, we've focused housing and job growth primarily in our regional mobility hub network. So this map here shows the regional mobility hubs that are being drafted for the regional plan. And these areas were identified based on the transit network that's being proposed for this regional plan. They're also, we used a number of metrics to identify we used a propensity analysis, we call it, to identify areas that would be good candidates for mobility hub areas. And so some of the other data that was used in that process were population data, employment data, communities of concern, and as we considered all of this data along with the transportation system, these were the areas that rose to the surface for mobility hubs. And so we can go to the next slide. So as we're developing the draft regional plan and this land use scenario that will be a part of it, we wanted to come to you all today to have a discussion about uses of both the regional growth forecast data and this land use scenario. Because we realize it's a little bit different approach than what we've had in past regional plans, and want to ensure that we're really describing this scenario correctly and then able to provide the data in a way to you that's useful and most valuable. So these are some of the questions that we had in your agenda today. So looking at what are the key data and levels of geography that you rely on from this forecast, and how do you use this information? What are the types of planning efforts that you would be requesting this type of data from SANDAG? And then as we develop guidance around use of the forecast and SCS land use scenario, what would be most helpful? What are the details that you're looking for to make sure that you understand the kind of assumptions and methods behind this data, and how can we document that best? So maybe we can start with that set of questions to really talk about the current work. And then we also have a question here about our future work that as we develop the next series growth forecast, we want to talk about with you too. So with that, I'll hand it back to the chair to help facilitate some discussion.
Okay. Thank you both for an excellent presentation as usual, as far as where we're at, where we want to be headed in the future. So this is a great opportunity for us to all provide that feedback to SANDAG staff that have requested. So with that, I'm going to ask for our participants to go ahead and raise their hands if they would like to provide some feedback, and bear with me as I kind of navigate through my participant list.
Chair Brindley, this is Seth. You may also want to ask if there's any public comment on the item before we get into the discussion.
Thank you for that reminder. So with that prompt, is there any public comment? This is the opportunity where the attendees can raise their hands, and I'll go ahead and call on any attendee that I see that has their hand raised.
This is Tate Galloway. I'm with the city of San Diego as an alternate, so I don't believe I could raise my hand. I don't know if I'm set up in the team in the meeting that way, but happy to wait my turn. But I just want to let you know that.
Okay, I'm sorry, sir. What was your name again?
Tate Galloway.
All right.
Tate, we have you listed as a panelist, so you should have the ability to raise your hand. If not, if folks are having trouble with the hand raising, you can always turn on your camera, and that way the chair knows to call on you as well. But we'll get to you, Tate, as part of the member comments.
Okay, so I am again scrolling through, and I'm not seeing any other hands raised at this point.
I don't see any hands raised from the public either, so you can move on.
Okay. And just kind of looking at my screen here. So I've got, let me go back to my panelist list. I've got a few hands raised, and let me just kind of go down the list. Go ahead and call on Dave DeVries from City of Poway.
Thanks, Karen. I just want to say, I think it was really good last time when we were coordinating Rachel with those one-on-one meetings. So that was really helpful. And then I think all the maps that Sandag provided was really helpful. I know there was some maps that showed existing units and then capacity units, and then being able to mark those up. I don't know if there's a way to do it digitally where we see the changes in kind of real time, but that would help, I think a lot of the back and forth coordination, because I know that was a lot of work for Sandag, having to input all the markups and then we'd have to recheck and things like that. So, maybe even a meeting where we can mark it up in real time. I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. That's a great point. And we're actually talking now about when we start the Series 15 kind of capacity input collection process, that it'll be using a mapping tool online that will be able to have the same kind of information in those paper maps, but like you're saying, it'll be more of like a real time. We'll see your comments and incorporate them and update it and then share them again with you. But if the paper maps were helpful, we could probably do that in tandem if that was also something that would be helpful for you guys. So, but I
Definitely.
think, yeah, okay.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel.
Thank you.
If I could hop on that, I would also agree that the paper maps are useful. It allows for, I think, just greater flexibility as it relates to the review process. It's always a great practice to do it digitally, but the tangible work product is also an opportunity to coordinate with other staff members and collectively be able to review at the same time. So I would support also what Dave is requesting regarding that coordinated effort. Okay, next up, I've got Mike Strong, City of Escondido.
Yes, thank you. I think to kind of build on something that David DeVries mentioned, there is obviously a very thorough effort by the partner cities to update the land use inputs that go into these model calibrations for series forecasting. But to me, there might be an opportunity worth exploring to somehow connect it also with the traffic modeling that is done by each respective agency. Because you can imagine duplicating this effort when those cities do go through those types of efforts. And certainly because of the evolution of how we're evaluating projects and VMT, and if agencies haven't done that already, they will be. So I think if there's a way to build the system so that when model inputs are refined, that there's a way to kind of associate it or somehow coordinate both the inputs that are gathered from either effort into the other. Having them as mutually exclusive processes is just, well, a little frustrating, I guess. But some of the positive things, I use the data quite a bit, and I know it's not just at like the place level or at the jurisdiction level. I typically have even worked with schools, school districts, formerly with one that processed the bond measure to understand, facility needs. And we're going through similar exercises now, updating our development impact fees or looking at new quality of life standards. So, the information that we get at the different levels of geography are very useful, and I've used it quite a bit extensively. If anything, I would probably want more for some of the larger jurisdictions, or even at the sub-regional level, if there's one that could be done for like North County. But yeah, I think that the forecasting tools that we currently have are great, and I use them all the time. And my only criticism would be to try to relate it or associate with other efforts that are similar, like the traffic modeling.
Thank you. That's helpful. I honestly don't know a lot about what you're asked to input from the traffic model, but I will look into that and I might reach out to you for more information if that's okay.
Mike, you're on mute if you're providing a response, just a FYI.
Oh, sorry. No, I wasn't.
On mute again.
Oh, I responded. I didn't respond to that. That's fine. I can touch base with Rachel separately.
Perfect. Thank you for following up. Okay, so I see Joseph Smith's hand up from City of Del Mar. You're up.
Yeah, hey there. Just a couple questions. One was on the timing of Series 15 and when that data, whatever the projected target is to complete that data. And then the second question just relates to the 7th cycle RENA. I know we're looking ahead a little bit, but with respect to those numbers that'll come out, does any of this data go into those assumptions that'll be relied upon in the future?
I will talk about Series 15 maybe, and then there might be someone a little better for the RENA. I was involved with the process for the jurisdictions this time, but I don't really know enough about the next cycle. I was hoping there wouldn't be one, but I guess that's not going to happen. So, just kidding. I love it. So we are talking now about Series 15. We're hoping to maybe start in the end of the summer, maybe early fall, to start reaching out to you guys. It's really the local jurisdiction outreach is the first part of the process. There's a couple things we have to figure out internally. One of which is what the base year of the forecast is, and if we want to wait for census data to start that process. So there's some things we need a couple more months to figure out. The first real sub-regional, sub-state census data doesn't come out till September. So we're trying to decide if we need to wait till September or after to start that part of the process. But I think very high level, I think we would start the process end of this year, beginning of next year for the forecast, and probably be done with our part and handing it off to transportation modelers in late 2022 or 2023 for that 2025 regional plan adoption. I don't know if Allison is really, I should have let you talk, Allison, because you know much more about the timeline than I do, but yeah.
No, that's great. I think the only other thing I'll add on RENA is that, we were in kind of a unique cycle with this whole plan and the relationship with RENA, where we delayed our regional plan by 2 years, but the RENA process kind of continued on at its normal time frame. And so we have had to adapt our land use scenario to ensure that we're reflecting the RENA allocations in this scenario. And so for Series 15, that will inform the 2025 regional plan, like Rachel said, that does not have a RENA, an updated RENA plan associated with it. And then the next regional plan, I guess 2029, would have the RENA plan done in tandem, I believe, with that one. And hopefully Seth can correct me if I got any of that wrong. But that's the way I understand how they'll work together. Did that answer your question, Joseph?
Yeah, I think it did. Thank you.
Okay. It's kind of an iterative process, and why we want to make sure we're getting the latest information from you all every few years to reflect all your updated planning assumptions.
Okay, so been a little bit remiss here. I want to call on Tate Galloway from City of San Diego, who's been patiently waiting to provide his input. So Tate, you're up. And then
Great,
Mike,
thank you.
I'll get to you next.
Hi, Rachel. Hi, Allison. Thanks for the presentation. So I look forward to working with you guys again on this. Just to answer your question, obviously for us, we really like to get down into the weeds with the data. So even internally, if we can always look at the parcel level data, I understand the employment restrictions on that, but for getting it for looking at least housing and population would always be helpful. At a minimum, the MGRA level, but anything bigger than that, it gets harder for us to use. Our water and sewer modeling departments also use it for our water forecasting and also our sewer needs as well. So to that information is super helpful. And I would recommend, I certainly that using an online tool is great. If you did, just if you had like an aerial existing land use, what's the general plan or community plan land use, and then what was the forecast read data or information related to that particular parcel. So that way you can make a comparison and understand as to whether or not that area has changed. So basically just looking at it and being able to say, you know, what was done before and is this area going to change? But happy to work with you on, you know, before getting all of our permit data. So you have all that as well to update housing information. So really appreciate that. And that's pretty much it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Tate. That's a great point. And I think this is also probably a good group to say that we're looking into purchasing data, maybe employment data that's not as confidential or restricted, because I know that we have gotten a lot of requests for seeing that data at a low level of geography, and not being able to share it has been an issue. So we are looking into procuring a different data set for employment for the next round. So I will remind myself to keep you guys up to date on that, because I know that it's very useful to be able to see the small level small level data, and having confidentiality restrictions was really difficult this time around. So I appreciate that.
And I just also add to one of the key things that we're really using it for is when we start our community plan updates, we look at the forecast data. So to be able to match that and look at our assumptions for our community plan build outs really helps as well. So that way we're not reporting numbers that are drastically different when we're going out to the community between what we're projecting for build out versus what's actually been forecasted.
Okay. Very good. So next up, I've got Mike Strong again from City of Escondido.
Thank you. So I seem to recall the last decennial census counts also not being available until late of that following year. So that doesn't surprise me with the 2020 version. But I seem to recall that the information that was gathered from that, in particular the population estimates, or sorry, the population counts, were far lower than the estimates that were utilized for that round of regional planning. So I guess the takeaway from that, since the forecasting takes in a number of economic and market forces to assume different population, job, and housing growth over different time periods, if there's a way, because you mentioned Rachel earlier that you guys were contemplating on how to move forward, but if there's a way to kind of mid-course account for any anomalies with the decennial counts, the census counts, just because, you know, the starting point is going to be a pretty significant driver into what growth will be assumed by like different benchmark years like 2030 or 2035. And those are the benchmark years that a lot of us are using for, you know, different planning efforts, such as like climate action planning, for example. So getting the starting point is just as important as the land use inputs that would dictate the endpoint for the 2050 build out. So I was just kind of hoping that there would be some sort of mechanism in place where the project team can take into account that the census numbers, should they, like I said, have some anomalies behind our baseline data that we currently are using.
Yes, that's a great point. And I was not here at the time, but I have heard about that the census was a lot lower than the estimates had been. And yeah, I mean, we definitely revised versions that were provided for modeling purposes, and it caused a lot of issues this year. So I'm hoping not to do that as much for this version, but I think we'll do what we need to do to make sure that the data are good. And maybe when we know more about census, we can come back to the twig and talk about what we're planning to do, because there's also some changes to the data availability that's going to be happening in 2020 census data. So we're going to have to really pivot a lot on, it's not just going to be business as usual with the census data. We're going to have to make some pretty big adjustments, I think. So, but I think that would be great to, if we came back to the twig, maybe when we knew a little bit more about what we were going to get and how we were going to use it. I think that would be great. So,
Okay,
and I love the
great.
census, so always happy to talk about census data. So.
All right, thank you, Rachel. And I do want to also share the support for having stronger employment data, both civilians employed and jobs and respective aggregates, because I always have to search around for that data and it's not easy to get. So thank you.
Yeah, I would say that 90% of the data requests I get are for employment data. So I'm assuming that they're very hard to find, and we're the only suckers that are putting it together. So we have to do all of that work.
Okay, thank you, Anna. I'm sorry, of course, there's always got to be some sort of an interruption. It's my boss. He'll have to wait. I'm sorry about that distraction here. So I've got Tate raising his hand.
Thank you. I did want to also mention just the issue of the census. One of the issues that we have with it is, and I mean, it's not an issue, it's just a matter of what it is the census obviously tries its very best to count all units. And then when we then rely upon the county assessor data, we have a discrepancy between legal and, how can I say it, non-legal units. So that tends to overinflate the number of units when you look at the census base year as opposed to a non-census base year.
Thank you, Tate. That's a good point. And I think our counterparts, Grace Chong, maybe when we have more information about census, I'll definitely talk to her about that. I'm not sure how they reconcile that in the past, but that's a great point.
Okay, thank you. So I'm sorry, I've got Alyssa Muto, City of San Diego. You're up.
We're just tag teaming, right? So I wanted to just mention, the city has migrated and is migrating into an Excella for our development projects. Has there been much discussion at our kind of IT level of having the feedback loop from Excella into Sandag's model or any of these inputs to help to ground truth some of that data a little bit more? I know a couple other jurisdictions have similar systems, so I just put that out there as a thought of maybe one additional input that could be, and I make it sound so simple, plugged into the Sandag inputs.
And last year, Alyssa, or last time, we worked with Rachel and Allison and others to actually take all the permit data that we did have that was coming off of OpenDSD, and they did an excellent job actually cleaning it up, and we'd use that. So I would anticipate, yeah, we'd work closely with them to make sure that we're getting output from Excella plus any of our legacy permit data before that.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add with that, but if other cities had the same kind of thing, yeah, it would be great. We definitely want to know those projects, but I don't know, Karen, if there's no questions, I was wondering maybe Allison, I could prompt a little more on the on the questions that we were hoping to get answered. So before you close out.
Sure, yeah, and I want to be mindful of time. We've got a couple of, we've got the UCSD item on the agenda, and I believe that'll take us about a half an hour. So according to my watch, we're at a little after about 4:05. So I think we definitely have some time to field some additional questions. I just want to let you know to be, for the whole group to know that we need to budget our time accordingly.
Yeah, that's great. I don't want to take up too much time, but I think one thing that Allison and I were hoping to maybe get at more specifically is, given the SCS land use pattern that is the forecast, the land use pattern that's being used in the forecast, in the travel modeling and the regional plan, thoughts the jurisdictions you guys had about using those data for those kind of research purposes that we've touched on here, like the school district information that Mike talked about, or other research projects that you might be working on. And we made a distinction here between kind of that regional growth forecast and then this land use scenario. And we're having internal discussions about how to provide documentation on those sources, like what information you guys or you anticipate yourself or your stakeholders needing about those different kind of versions, I guess we'll call it. I don't know if Allison, does that kind of capture?
Yeah, and maybe I can just elaborate a little bit here that, we're the land use scenario this time around, as I mentioned, kind of focuses growth into our mobility hub areas. And so we see it as having a bit more of that kind of policy driven approach in terms of focusing housing and jobs into those areas to support meeting our GHG target. And so it's just a different way that we're putting together that kind of underlying land use assumption for the plan. And it has a lot of benefits. I think it'll align with your RHNA planning, and it'll support a lot of your climate action planning goals as well by focusing growth closer to our transportation system. We just want to get a sense for, we wouldn't anticipate all of the same use cases with this SCS land use scenario as the regional growth forecast data that we've produced in the past. So we're trying to distinguish them, and want to, and maybe we can even dive into this a bit further at another time, so that you can get a better understanding of what these differences look like for your jurisdiction. But that's sort of some of the information we're wanting to get your feedback on. And looks like Alyssa has her hand up, so maybe I can turn it back to Karen and see if there are other questions or discussion based on that.
Yeah, I think Alyssa, you're the only hand that I see raised at this point, so why don't you go ahead and offer it up.
So when I think about the SCS and its opportunities for the city of San Diego, and likely a lot of our partners across the region, is the opportunity to have some of the conversations around the changes in land use patterns already initiated, and then the opportunities. And I'll put on the CEQA hat, because I'm always thinking about how do we take that process and address it more cleanly, streamlined. And so the SCS, and I think unlike any other time in the past, we really actually can have an SCS moving forward that can be the tip of the spear for our projects that follow on and our policies. So I think it's understanding, for me, a little bit more about some of the inputs into the land use that we can go back and monitor to verify that we're making progress forward to not just those GHG cap goals, but also those land use goals of matching our residential and employment back to where the transit propensity or the bike and ped propensity occurs, and that we're really seeing that mutual benefit or that kind of cycle that can occur of more housing, more employment creates more transit, creates more bikes, creates more people, you know, and so on and so forth, with the infrastructure that's threaded through for parks and schools and other civic needs. So I really kind of see the work that we're all doing together here in the Sandag space to be that first cut at the public outreach and conversation about moving us and pivoting as a city and a region.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And I think we almost could have had a question on here about metrics too, to think about, you know, part of our regional plan will include performance monitoring kind of framework. And so thinking about some of those metrics that we can monitor over time is helpful too.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Tony Shute, City of El Cajon, with his hand raised, and perhaps after his input, we can wrap up this agenda item, just given the timeframes that we're on. But please offer as much as with that setup, Tony. please offer up your comments and questions.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for setting me up there. I don't want to get into specific of how El Cajon could leverage or what kind of conversation we have, but in this forum, but I want to suggest that perhaps trailing off what Alyssa just said, is that maybe the SES is unique to each jurisdiction. Maybe the metrics are different. Maybe the planning's different. And perhaps, I don't know how you, Allison and Rachel, feel about maybe a more intimate discussion with each jurisdiction at a different time. So we can really kind of hash out, you know, what's particular to our jurisdiction.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And maybe I know this will be a more of a universal approach in the end, but maybe some building blocks of that can be particular to each jurisdiction.
Yeah.
I don't know how you feel about that.
I think that's great. And I think it also hits on, you know, some of Mike's comments about just spending time with you all as we're getting land use inputs and getting information on the transportation system. You know, these are all kind of SCS inputs, quote unquote, that we can really, I think it makes sense to spend a lot of thoughtful time with you all to develop that input, make sure we're understanding how you want to use this information too. So yeah, that's great.
Okay, so I did say that we need to wrap up this item, but I did not have a chance to offer some additional feedback. So I think it's more in support of what a comment that Mike Strong had made in relation to ensuring that the forecast process as we go through it, that it does align with essentially what's going to happen with the traffic modeling. I think those two are critical components, because as we continue with various projects, whether it's a land use project or it's a city sponsored project, oftentimes there'll be some reliance on traffic modeling through Sandag, and just wanting to really ensure that those land use inputs are as accurate as possible, because it really does have a potential domino effect as it relates to some of those outcomes of the traffic modeling services. So I would certainly support the comments that Mike made in that respect. And then as far as other types of use that we have relied on the data sources, typically when we've been updating our general plan, and then also for some of the climate action planning, as well as some of our economic development efforts, have tapped into some of the regional data. So I just wanted to offer those comments as well to this particular agenda item before I move on. Okay, so with that, thank you everybody for a pretty robust discussion on this particular items. Once again, appreciate everybody's feedback. I would certainly encourage, because would certainly encourage any follow-up with Sandag staff on this particular item. Not everybody had an opportunity to perhaps speak on the item, but I know that there's ongoing interest both by Allison and Rachel to obtain as much input as possible from this collective group, and certainly encourage that to continue on. Okay, so thank you both. So moving right along, we've got agenda item number 5 here. We've got Keith Pizzoli from UCSD to talk to us a little bit about this year's Urban Expo.
Okay, should I take the mic now?
Yes.
Well, thanks. I really appreciate giving us this opportunity to share our research with you. We have a panel. There'll be a presentation by 3 students and 2 faculty members, and we know we don't have a lot of time, so this has been choreographed with a few slides, but I want to kind of contextualize it a bit. This is our 5th time doing this, and Seth, thank you very much. You're becoming a veteran. This is now your 2nd time doing this. So this is the 5th time we've had the Sandag Technical Working Group meeting alongside our expo. Now, if this wasn't for COVID, you'd be in the red room in the Price Center Ballroom right now. And when we're done doing what we're gonna do, you'd all waltz over into the ballroom, chock full of beautiful scientific poster eye candy and students and food. Fortunately, you're not gonna get that. It's gonna be a virtual thing. You should all have the link to that. But I just want to say sort of what the context is here. The 3 students that you'll be hearing from have completed a 6-month independent research journey to earn their bachelor's degree in urban studies and planning, and it's their capstone thesis project. So I put out a call to the students saying, hey, we've got this wonderful opportunity to get in front of Sandag and the technical working group, the planners of our region and others. Does anybody want to, pull something together? So of course, a few student leaders leaped at the opportunity, and they put something together on housing. So I'm not going to say much more than that, other than, let's see, these students are, looking to network, and obviously they're about to graduate. So they're looking for jobs and connections and so forth. In addition to the students, we asked the students and I, because this is on housing, we asked 2 professors, Professor Merle Bussell and Professor Leslie Lewis, to share with us a little bit about what they're doing with regard to houselessness or homelessness, where people are, living out of their cars and what's going on with that. And Merle and Leslie are leading the charge to create a homelessness hub to understand the homelessness crisis and strategies to alleviate that. So we thought that might be a good complement. So I'm going to turn it over to who's got the first slide and is going to sort of run this, ask for forwarding. Who's the first presenter?
Enrique's up first.
Enrique. Okay, so I'm going to simmer down, sit back and enjoy. I want one last thing. Thank you for suggesting we sit in on your meeting early. I think it gives me comfort, and I think I speak for all of us, to see the rigor and the thoughtfulness that you're putting into modifying the regional growth forecast and how you're going about that process. I think it's really important, obviously, for lots of reasons. So I wanted to thank you. Enrique, take it away. And introduce yourself. I didn't do that, so maybe just say who you are and the title of your project, however you're going to do that.
Sure. I'm not sure how we're progressing the slides.
You just tell them to progress. Next slide.
Got it. Okay. I didn't know that you had it. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Enrique. I'm a student at UCSD and an urban planning major. I'm also an intern at LaSar Development Consultants. I do some work related to disaster recovery and wildfire recovery, so CDBG-DR grants. Could you go to the next slide, please, Leslie? Or the first slide of the presentation. So this presentation is about community land trusts online, specifically how community land trusts use the internet to present and network with one another. Next slide, please. And the immediate question which comes after that is, why talk about community land trusts at all? And that's because CLTs connect to one of the most important discussions in urban planning today, which is about the housing crisis. CLTs create long-term affordable units by separating the value of land from the value of the structures on top of that land. Land is placed into community ownership, and the structures on top have their resale value limited. And what this does is it pushes back against speculation on land and drives down costs. Next slide, please. The question which immediately follows that is, okay, if CLTs are important and valuable for the housing discussion, then why talk about the internet? And I decided to research the internet because nobody else was talking about CLTs on the internet, and they really should be, because the internet is a key part of how all of us as organizations and as individuals are organizing and communicating with each other now. There's an ethnographer of the internet who refers to it as a kind of infrastructure that underpins the things that people do. Infrastructure is a good way to explain it. I also like to think of it as just part of the shared cultural water that we're all swimming in. It's part of our aggregate experience, how we move through the world, even if we don't always perceive it. So the chunk of the water, internet water, sample, if you want to be scientific, that I looked at in the study were 30 total websites from Oakland, Berkeley, and Richmond. Next slide, please. And one of the immediate findings from that is that there were three main types of websites involved in the movement. The first were sites of individual community land trusts, either on their own webpage or on social media. The second were the pages of CLT advocacy organizations. These were dedicated to pushing out content, advocating for the community land trust model and its worth. And the third were democratic economy advocacy sites. I came up with that name myself. It's not the snappiest, but these sites were sort of had the largest mandate. They were dedicated to advocating for wholesale restructuring of the economy along democratic and cooperative lines, and included CLTs as part of that mission. Next slide, please. So these sites had some shared strategies that they used to advocate for CLTs. And one of the main ones is that the same sites were playing different roles within the movement. Every single site in the sample that was classified as an individual CLT was also classified as a CLT advocacy site. In addition, many of the democratic economy advocacy sites were also working as CLT advocates, and they included CLTs as part of their broader mandate. Movement sites also consistently had pages up that were just explaining what community land trusts are. So what is this ownership structure? How is it different from an apartment complex? Why does it exist? Basic information like that. And websites were also using their presence to attract new resources, onboarding volunteers on their web pages and asking for donations. Next slide, please. However, these sites weren't just acting as individual advocates. They were also using their web presence to establish themselves as allies working together within a movement. Sites were consistently publishing mission statements that reference the same key values about democratic control, access, and community welfare. And they were also, this is especially on social media, linking to each other's web pages frequently and publishing one another's content. Next slide, please. So looking at CLTs on the internet tells us something about the movement as a whole. And it's important to look at that if we want land trust to be part of our housing strategy. It tells us, looking at them on the internet, that these organizations aren't just machines that create permanently affordable housing. They're not just input-output organizations. They're also practiced advocates for their model as an alternative form of land tenure. But the flip side of all of that advocacy work is that with so much energy put into it, it's telling us that people probably just aren't that familiar with forms of alternative land tenure like CLTs. So if CLTs are to be part of the response to the San Diego region's housing crisis, then one place to start could be by increasing public conversation around alternative forms of land ownership like CLTs. So that was my research. Thank you for your time, and it was a pleasure to be with you all today.
Hi, everyone. Hope you all are doing well. My name is Alan Reyes, and I'm an intern at the City of Poway, and I'm happy to share my findings with you today. In March 2020, the pandemic caused a nationwide economic and employment crisis, as many individuals were significantly affected by COVID-19. With 2,860 confirmed cases and 141 deaths from March 1st through 4th alone, Mayor Garcetti ordered a citywide lockdown as COVID-19 became a local emergency. Acknowledging the financial instability of many Angelenos, the City of Los Angeles Housing and Community Investment Department quickly outlined the structure of the Emergency Rental Assistance Subsidy Program, a two-time $1,000 financial subsidy for multifamily tenants given to landlords in lieu of their rent. This was one of the first COVID relief resources supplied to Angelenos, and the purpose of my research was to evaluate its effectiveness, exploring the importance of federal financial assistance. Next slide, please. Thank you. One of my main findings from my case study was that while tenants were approved to receive the subsidy, their landlords were able to reject the program. The idea of receiving $2,000 was tempting to a majority of landlords. However, for those who had rejected it, they would have rather had a new tenant who paid more rent than the subsidy being provided. And so this caused renters to worry whether they would actually receive the financial support, and it forced HCIDLA to give the subsidy directly to the renter instead of the landlord. It was not something that the department originally wanted to do. However, it was their only solution. And while the case study provided direct information, it also lacked human connection. So this led to interviews with DeShirley, an HCIDLA employee, Phillips, a Los Angeles housing professional, and Ferna, the City Heights Community Development Executive Director. And those three individuals all supported the program. Within these interviews, one could comprehend the pressure that they felt from being in charge of creating a program of this magnitude, the tenants' anxiety waiting for this program, and how it felt being an outsider observing the City of Los Angeles' program. Next slide, please. Thank you. This program was one of the most essential resources during the pandemic, providing $103 million to 50,000 multifamily tenants. Receiving the subsidy meant that individuals could now use the money once allocated for rent towards other basic needs like groceries and bills. While this program was a success, it was also a loud cry for help, as Angelenos should not have relied on this to remain housed. When offered again in 2021, the biggest suggestion is to have it be all-inclusive and to increase the amount of aid being provided. As one of the few new studies focusing on HCIDLA and its ARIS program, this contributes to other COVID-related research about rental protections during the pandemic. This provides other jurisdictions with a blueprint on what to do when implementing their own programs within their cities and counties. Thank you.
Okay, next up, I think we should have Zachary.
Yeah, Zach.
Yes. Hi, everyone. Hi, everyone. My name is Zach. I'm actually starting an internship with Sandag, doing transit planning in a couple weeks. And today I'm going to be talking about a related subject, the role of housing in suburban transit-oriented development. And specifically, I'm going to be looking at a case study of Orange County, California. That's where I grew up. And so I'm going to be discussing how we can redevelop suburban areas to make them more sustainable and provide more housing, especially where we need it the most. And so here in this photo, we see Orange County, and kind of in this photo, we kind of see the specific problems that are posed for this type of development. I forget the next slide, please. So here we see that Orange County is focused on single-family residential zoning, which inhibits sufficient density. And this land use pattern creates a domino effect, which leads to abundant automobile infrastructure. And that comes at the expense of comprehensive transit. And the low density that this creates contributes to the region's severe housing shortage, which is an issue all throughout the state of California, which all contributes to an overall lack of sustainability in the region. Get the next slide, please. So I was looking for solutions, and I found research on similar transit expansion projects that were undertaken by the cities of Portland and Denver and their respective regions. So both of these regions underwent massive expansions of their rail transit networks by expanding the rail transit into the suburbs around the cities. A lot of this was light rail, the kind of stuff that we see here in San Diego and in other places of a similar demographic and geographic makeup. And so in both cases, the catchment areas around all the new rail stations supported thousands of new housing units along with other development, but in this case, we're looking specifically at housing. Over 7,000 housing units were constructed in Portland and around 6,000 or 7,000 in Denver as well. The next slide. And so these plans are applicable to Orange County. And so I looked at 3 specific locations where we can use these mobility hub transit center kind of developments and where they can be established to combine comprehensive transit with high density housing. The first place I looked at was the campus of Cal State Fullerton in the city of Fullerton. Cal State Fullerton is already home to a lot of high density housing, both on campus and just off campus, much like we see here at UC San Diego. And so it's pretty plausible to see an expansion of transit to an area that already can support it with high density housing where a lot of students live. And additionally, a lot of these students don't have cars or have cars at a lower rate than the average resident of the county. And so they rely on transit more, which makes it an even better candidate for this type of development. The second place I looked was the city of Anaheim at the big intermodal transit center there. It's currently has plans to massively expand development around the transit center in its vicinity. And the city of Anaheim is working with the 2 local sports teams to redevelop the entire neighborhood, basically, which is a lot of right now is industrial land and surface parking lots. And they have plans to build thousands of new housing units along with entertainment districts and office space that would support the transit center here, as well as bring a lot of new residents and housing to the city of Anaheim. And the final place that I looked was in Costa Mesa, which is in the central part of the county, and specifically at the South Coast Plaza area. South Coast Plaza is one of the biggest malls in Southern California, and it's also surrounded by a lot of other commercial development. And so there's already a large concentration of different types of development here. The only thing that's missing is sufficient transit in order to get there. And so instead, we see a lot of surface parking there, which can be supplemented or replaced even by better transit and high density housing development in order to better support the people that live there and that can live there and that need to commute there for work. Make the next slide, please. And so in order to make transit more successful, especially out in the suburbs, we have to make sure that it's coupled with housing, because without housing, transit won't be successful. And without transit, housing will be unsustainable. And so Orange County has several specific opportunities to do this in a lot of different ways, like I mentioned. So in Fullerton, we only seem to need to add transit to supplement housing that exists. In Anaheim, it's just the opposite. And in Costa Mesa, we see different types of development that can be supplemented by both transit and housing in order to create a very complete community there. And so Orange County and similar areas, even here in San Diego, we have a model to base our future development on in order to make it more sustainable and more equitable. We just need to make sure that we can take that opportunity and seize it and take advantage of it. Thank you all.
All right.
Oh, there you go.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much again for welcoming us to your meeting. Along with my colleague, Dr. Leslie Lewis, we're going to briefly share with you a couple of initiatives within our department looking at homelessness. And we're really representing so many of our other colleagues, faculty members, staff researchers, our librarians on campus, and our students. So next slide, please. So we're going to share with you 2 initiatives that we have underway right now. That combine research and teaching. We believe very strongly in the Department of Urban Studies and Planning that our research should support our teaching and vice versa. You've just heard from 3 of our students who are brilliant researchers, and they're going to take these skills on to the next phase of their careers. So we're going to share with you 2 different research projects. One that's an ongoing evaluation of a relatively innovative program, Jewish Family Service of San Diego's Safe Parking Program. Another project we're about a year into it, our Homelessness Hub. And then we'll also talk about how we've paired the research with an innovative new experiential learning course. And so I'll turn it over to Leslie to discuss the next slide, please. Thank you.
So as Muriel said, so we're evaluating this. The JFS has a safe parking program. We're in year 2 of a 2-year mixed method study. And so we're looking at both quantitative data. We're analyzing HMIS data, looking at homelessness data and some of their internal data to get a sense of sort of a demographic profile and also a sense of, where are people going, what percentage of people go on to get stably housed. But we were also interested in sort of the human stories and the trajectories. So we again paired this with a class, and I'll tell you about that in a second, but we trained students as co-researchers really, and they conducted over 70 oral history interviews last year. And that gave us a sense of, what are the stresses that people are facing? What are their strengths? And we also did listening sessions with the staff, the Direct Line staff at the 4 different sites. And, you know, just some initial findings. This is a very diverse demographic. A significant number of older adults. I don't know if people know, but you know, older adults are the fastest growing subpopulation of people who are unhoused. It confirmed the stuff we had seen in the literature about the structural causes of mass homelessness or houselessness. You know, that's sort of the baseline economic insecurity and the lack of affordable housing. And you couple that with hits that people would have, and that is certainly what we saw. Very rich human stories. We also saw, you know, the same kind of racial inequity that we see in the data across the country. You see, you know, Black and Native American and Pacific Islander individuals and families, you know, at rates 4 to 5 times what we're seeing for white families. And we're seeing that this is of clear benefit. Certainly in the immediate, it clearly reduces suffering, offering a place where people can catch their breath and sort of a reprieve from the kind of stigmatizing gaze, resources, and support so that people can sort of get on their feet. Next slide. And so as Muriel said, we coupled this with teaching. We like to always combine our research and our teaching and our action so that it feels meaningful for all of us. So we had our inaugural class of, we called it Urban Challenges, Homelessness in San Diego, trained students in being researchers. So they learned about qualitative and quantitative research. But more importantly, before that, we sort of grounded them in the historical and the structural and the cultural kinds of contributors to mass homelessness. They learned about, you know, the experience of what it's like and what are the impacts, what are the health impacts, what are the impacts on communities, et cetera. And we were interested in also what would be the impacts, you know, is there a change in knowledge, perceptions, attitudes, and found that indeed, you know, so we did a pre-course survey for both the class and a control group, and then a post-course survey for them in the control group, and found indeed an increase in understanding. Students grasped those structural factors, shifted their perceptions, deeper empathy, and they have greater knowledge of policies and those kinds of things. So really a transformative experience. Next slide.
All right, and so I'll just briefly share with you another initiative, and this is one that we started, it's just about a year or so ago, that evolved out of conversations between some of our faculty, some of our staff researchers, as well as some of our community partners, right? So we all acknowledge we have a crisis of homelessness in the San Diego region. It's a very wicked problem. It's going to take a lot of different people and a lot of different resources for us to bring ourselves to functional zero with homelessness. And both Leslie and I, along with our colleagues, believe that this is possible. So how do we get there? So one of the things that came out of a series of conversations within the department is that prior to this point, there was not a centralized source of data related to homelessness for the entire San Diego region. You know, we recognize that to tackle and to understand and to respond to this complex problem, we need data-driven responses, right? We need to have data to help guide our policy responses, to be able to share with elected officials. So we came up with this project called the H-Hub, or the Homelessness Hub. Many of you obviously are familiar with GIS. So this is a GIS-based community data portal. We recognize the importance of being able to do spatial analysis and mapping, the power of visualization. And so what we did, we received funds from the Lucky Duck Foundation, as well as the Yankelovich Center for Social Science Research at UC San Diego. And so we are building a data hub. This will be when we go live with it, which will be hopefully in another couple months. This will be an open access free hub, data on homelessness across the San Diego region. We're in the process now of collecting existing data. What we found is there are lots of disparate sources of data, but they aren't, again, in this one central place. A lot of the data that we found kind of messy, spending a lot of time cleaning up the data, you know, putting it into, you know, Excel so we can then map it. As new projects and new data emerges, we will add that to the H-Hub as well. And again, this is to support research, to understand service gaps, to really understand our evidence base. This is a free hub. And in fact, with our funding, we also have a data navigator. So we have someone on staff who will be available if someone has a request, right? Hey, I'm interested in data on X, Y, and Z. Can you show me what you have in your hub? Can you help me work with this? and people will be able to make their own maps, download the data. You can download the Excel spreadsheets. This is very much a collaboration with our community partners. We've literally spent the past year having many, many virtual meetings with partners, predominantly in the nonprofit and the public sectors. So we've spoken with folks at the county level, different jurisdictions, lots of nonprofits. If we haven't spoken with you yet, we would love to speak with you. You know, it's really a big part of what we're doing. So Leslie and I and our colleagues would welcome the opportunity to speak with any of you who are interested in learning more. And then just a final piece, and related to what Leslie was sharing about our research on the Safe Parking program, is in addition to having the data, the hard data, we also want to share out stories of our unhoused San Diegans. So we have portions of the H Hub where we are elevating stories, experiences, sharing out resources. So stay tuned. We will be going live in a couple months. And in the meantime, please feel free to reach out to us. And if we could have the last slide, please. And just want to thank you again for the time. We do have our Urban Expo. We got my promo behind me. We're going live at 5 p.m., but you can also go to our website, usp.ucsd.edu, and we've got a virtual gallery. So you can go at your leisure to look at the posters that were presented by all of our students in our Urban Studies and Planning major and our Real Estate and Development major. And Keith put all the information in the chat. We've got the link to the Zoom session. So again, thank you all so very much.
Okay, thank you very much. Great presentations by the students, very informative, and a lot of effort went into your research projects as usual. Really do appreciate that. Keith, I think I kind of popped in here maybe a little prematurely. Just wanted to offer the opportunity for you to close out your section of this agenda item before we move forward.
Well, does anybody have a quick question for one of the students, or? I know we're kind of out of time a little bit, but did anything come to mind in particular? Or for Leslie and Merle as well?
Let me try to get my participant.
I see Tate has his hand up.
Okay, Tate, go ahead.
Hi, Zachary. I'm just curious, did you consider the Santa Ana streetcar and how that works with the Losan corridor and Metrolink?
I have done a little bit of research on the Santa Ana streetcar, just based on the constraints of the whole timing of the project. I didn't incorporate it a lot into it. I think it's a decent opportunity. If I'm being honest, I don't think it's going to be that transformative, just because it's kind of through I don't think it has enough connections and to outside things, and it seems like, if I'm being honest, a little bit more of a vanity project in just the little center of the county. But if we can get stuff like that to be more inclusive and more comprehensive, then I think it can be really valuable. I know there's another one planned in Anaheim, similar type thing, connecting the transit station through like all the sports stadiums down to Disneyland. And if those can start to become more comprehensive and more viable, I think they can be a good replacement for people who would like to drive a lot, but they have to be more universal, I think.
Well, and if I could encourage you folks, if you're able to visit the expo, that all three of these students, Enrique, Alan, and Zach, have not just their thesis project available, if they want to share that, but also a poster that they did and a video. And the videos are only 3 minutes long by design. So they're short and sweet. So if you're curious to hear more about their research, you can go into the link that we provided and navigate your way to their names and see their poster and watch their 3-minute video. So I guess I'll end, and I guess Karen, I guess you formally, you throw down the gavel or what?
Well, I've got just a couple of last items here to get through.
Okay.
But we're pretty close to throwing down the gavel. I'm mindful of the clock as usual, and we're supposed to end at 5. My clock says we got about 15 minutes to get there. So thank you again for just wonderful presentations, and it's always I've been the chair of the TWIG for about 4 years now, and this is always one of my greatest pleasures throughout the year is to be able to connect with the students and really re-engage with the passion that comes out of your program and the level of thoughtfulness that goes into all of the various projects. So congratulations to the UCSD students, and I'm encouraging everybody to log on to the expo to see what the Bright Minds have come up with this particular year. So once again, thank you.
And can we get a tentative commitment that we will carry this on for year 6 next year in person with free food from us to you?
I would strongly encourage that. I will be making an announcement here soon, so I cannot commit to that, but hopefully Sandag staff can.
Okay. Well, Seth, you're going to be around. Maybe you could make sure that happens. Such a great part of this whole thing. Okay, anyway. Yeah, thanks.
All right. Okay, so we're on to agenda item number 6. This is member communications. This is the opportunity for our TWIG members to, I know I said this a little bit earlier, it was a little premature, but this is the opportunity for us to also talk about anything exciting going on in our cities. I think we did have some input earlier, but I see John's hand is raised. So John Connolly, City of Vista, you're up.
Thanks, Karen. First, I want to thank all the students for their presentations. Those were great. It was very insightful, some good information there, and I appreciate all the hard work. It was very evident they put a lot of time and effort into it, so that was really cool. And I would support the request to do it again next year if we can make that happen. Secondly, I wanted to just update on Vista. We recently finished our Paseo Santa Fe street improvement project, which is a project that we got a lot of smart growth money from Sandag, and we appreciate that. The street improvements came out beautifully. We have a couple of mixed use projects right on the street that are going up, one affordable and one market rate project. So if you get a chance to come to Vista and check it out, we'd appreciate it. And then lastly, I just want to thank Karen for all of her efforts and hard work. I know she's moving on. I wish her the best of luck. We're really going to miss you. You've done a fantastic job as a chair of the TWIG. And I know it takes a lot of hard work. It's not just these meetings, and it's a lot of time spent. So I just want to convey how much I appreciate that and your friendship as well. So best of luck.
Thank you very much, John. And exciting things in Vista. I've personally visited the Paseo several times, and it's been really awesome to see the progress through the years. So congratulations on completing that project. I know just tremendous amount of work went through that endeavor, and it was a true team effort. So Vista is definitely a better place for all of those efforts. And thank you for the kind words regarding my tenure here as chair.
Thank you.
All right. So with that said, I don't see any other hands raised. As John just indicated, I think most of you know, I have accepted a position with another jurisdiction. I'm moving up to City of Lake Elsinore as their community development director. And so I'm handing off the reins, so to speak, as it relates to my chairperson duties. I have thoroughly enjoyed my tenure here in Sandag as the San Marcos representative. I was trying to think back. I think I've probably been engaged with Sandag for probably 20 years. Maybe a little longer, I'm not quite sure, but I think at least 20 years I've been representing San Marcos. It's been a true honor, so informative as far as being able to tap the collective minds of all of our colleagues here in the region in the planning profession. And I'm a better professional as a result of forming the relationships and just the professional information that we glean from these particular meetings. So been honored to serve as the chair. You're in good hands with Tony. And with that, I see that Seth's hand is raised. So I want to recognize Seth at this point. And Seth, you're on mute. Oh, there you go.
Thanks, Karen. And I just wanted to express Sandag's thanks to you for being the chair of the TWIG for such a long period of time and really putting in the effort that it takes to make these meetings successful. Your leadership, your willingness to work with us and make sure that we have an agenda really makes a big difference in how these meetings turn out. And it's been an absolute honor to work with you. I don't know if most everybody knows this, but the TWIG was the first working group at Sandag that did an online publicly noticed meeting. And I know we were winging it quite a bit, but Karen's steady leadership and determination to make sure that we ran a nice tight meeting and that we figured out what we were doing was instrumental. And I think it across the board for the other working groups and other meetings that we did, the TWIG became an example of how to do it right. And we certainly appreciate that. I also wanted to let you know, Karen, that since we couldn't circulate a nice card or something to share all of our well wishes with you, we did put together what's called a kudo board, and it should have been emailed to you to your San Marcos email address during the meeting. But it was an opportunity for the folks on the TWIG to drop some nice comments and well wishes to you as you move on to your next endeavor. So thank you so much for all that you've done, and it's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. I definitely appreciate that, and I'll look forward to opening the email. Luckily, I still have access here today. Technically is my last day, and I wanted to ensure that I had an opportunity to finish up with my chair duties, and again was excited because it correlates with the UCSD Expo, and I was coordinating with Seth quite a bit as far as, hey, let's make this happen and make sure that we have some continuity with that particular relationship. So again, just in conclusion, thank you again for all the kind words. And as I was kind of cleaning up my space today, I was going through several items and just looking at a few things from RENA cycles past. And as we all know, that's a pretty exciting process to go through. And I suppose I can't say I'm going to miss doing that again in this next cycle here with Sandag, but I wish everyone well in that respect. So again, thank you very much. And with that said, I'm going to kick it over to Seth to, oh, wait a minute. I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm so excited. I got about 6 minutes left. We've got agenda item 7 for future meeting topics. Does anyone want to offer anything up at this particular point? And not seeing any hands go up. So now I get to kick it over to Seth to talk to us about the next upcoming meeting.
Thank you, Karen. And before I start, I just wanted to let you know that Colleen Clemenson wanted to join us, but she's in a meeting, but she wanted me to share her absolute best with you as well. And thanks from all of Sandag for your efforts. For the upcoming April meeting that Karen won't be attending, we will be looking at moving the date of the meeting. I just wanted to make everyone aware of this. We're going to send you a save the date here pretty soon. And first of all, I wanted to thank you for your participation in the Closing the Digital Divide survey that our mobility and innovation team sent out last month. Really appreciate all the responses that we got for that. The mobility and innovation team is following up with a workshop to talk about ways to address the digital divide. Unfortunately, it couldn't coincide with the date of our TWIG meeting, but we're looking at setting up a joint working group meeting between the TWIG, the Transportation Advisory Committee that Sandag also has, and the San Diego Traffic Engineers Council. And all of these are made up of city staff from various departments. So what we're really trying to do is pull together the traffic engineers, the transportation folks, and the planners, and have about an hour-long workshop to start talking about some of the ways that we can address the digital divide and really find a way to make it work. So the tentative date that we're holding is April 22nd. It will be in the morning. I'm going to send out a save the date to all of the TWIG members so that you know, and you can put it on your calendars. But we will likely be canceling the TWIG meeting that's scheduled for April 8th and moving that 2 weeks to April 22nd. Also, we may have a very brief TWIG meeting before we do the workshop, and that the only item that would be on that agenda would be to select a new chair. We definitely want to make sure we get that going. So I'll just put out there, if any of the TWIG members have an interest in being nominated for the chair, we will have a nominating session at the April meeting, followed by a vote and an appointment of a new chair and also possibly of a vice chair if necessary. So keep an eye out for that email. We'll save the date, April 22nd, likely in the morning. And it'll be hopefully a very productive workshop, and we're hopeful to have as many TWIG members attend as we can.
All right. Thank you, Seth. All right. So according to my clock, I made it. We're at 4:56. We got it in before the 5 o'clock hour. So once again, thank you everybody for good participation in today's meeting, and just wish everyone continued success both in their local as well as regional planning efforts. And with that, we're adjourned. Have a good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.